this keynote. It's a great pleasure. It's an honor, of course, to have a chance to share some of my work with you in such a big and important conference. Thank you also everyone for attending the session. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge that the work, the ideas that I will be discussing today built on collaborations with a number of colleagues with whom I have been working in the past years. And I would like to acknowledge in particular the work of some former and current PhD students, and I'm thinking in particular about Peter Vandenbroek, with whom I've worked a lot and with whom I've actually published a number of papers on which I will be drawing today for this keynote. I'm also thinking about the work of other younger colleagues, Vivien Gain, Isabelle, Marie Stillman, with whom I've been working and developing these ideas. I would like to thank them for being inspiring and challenging colleagues. One cannot start a keynote today, I think, without reflecting on the world situation in which we find ourselves. The situation appears extremely complex, erratic, even with a series of crises piling up: the war or conflict, the pandemic, of course, climate change. Today, perhaps more than ever before, we live, or we seem to live, in a world without stable grounds. And of course, the work that we do, the scientific work that we do, is affected by this global situation in many different ways. It's visible right here and right now through the conference itself. We meet here face to face, but we know that many colleagues could not come. We will speak with them in a couple of weeks, but it will be through wires, screens, electricity, so we won't meet them physically. If we compare this year's conference with pre-pandemic conferences, one can get the impression that we suffer from the crisis, that ECER suffered from the crisis. There are less people, less days of face-to-face conference, less sessions. At the same time, however, what is remarkable, I think, is the many new ways of working, the many new ways of communicating, new ways of researching also, new ways of interviewing, new ways of organizing that have been emerging in the past few years in reaction to the crisis, and in particular in reaction to the pandemic. There's probably never been so much innovation and change in the field of research within just a couple of years. I think the same sort of process happened with education during the pandemic. Schools were closed, but education was never fully blocked. It tried to find its ways through new means. It invaded homes and families, it burdened parents with new roles, it attracted new actors, private investors, it accelerated the development of learning platforms, softwares, remote learning. So I think when we look at research, and our research and the conference and ERA reacted to the crisis, or when we look at how education reacted to the crisis, it's obvious that we should not simply think in terms of more or less, bigger or smaller, because times of crisis are also times where new forms emerge, new forms of research, new forms of education, new organizational forms as well. And as researchers, we need, and I think it's very important, we need to study these new forms. We need to describe them very carefully. We need to understand their function, their ways of including and excluding, how they affect us, what they require of us, how they transform us. Now, my keynote will not deal specifically with the pandemic or the other crisis, but it will deal with what I think is a deeper process underneath the crisis, what I called process of losing stable grounds, which, as I will try to explain, has a lot to do with crisis. So the full title of my keynote is Life Without Stable Grounds, Educational Expansion and Scapegoating. And my talk will consist mainly in an attempt to explain this title and the meaning that it hopes to convey. I will be speaking as a sociologist, and that means a number of different things. First, it means that I'm not interested at all in making any kind of normative statement about what is right or wrong, good or bad for education or for society. Instead, my goal is to show that the changes that we observe today in the field of education cannot be understood without a broader understanding and analysis of modern society. As a sociologist, and even as a sociologist of education, my concern is therefore not so much education per se, but rather the interdependence between education and society. Now, when we describe modern society, sociologists of education will most often speak of modern society as an unequal order, an unequal social order, and they will focus on the exercise of power. They will understand modern society as a stratified order, inequalities in which power plays an important role. Right? That's what you would usually expect of sociologists of education. But as you will see, the topics, these topics of inequalities and power stratification will not be very central in my talk today. I will try to give up another sociological perspective. I will try to follow the structure. First, drawing on the state of the art in social theory, I will speak of modern society as a world society, as a risk society, and as a knowledge society. And I will explain these elements in more depth. Then I will reflect on how these characteristics of modern society, how and why they lead to this process of losing stable grounds. And I will try to reflect on how this process of losing stable grounds affects education today. I will then speak in terms of the expansion of education and a process of looking at what punishment. And then I will add a few words of conclusion. Now, my first question is, how can we try to make sense of modern society? Is it even possible today to say something meaningful about modern society? If we take a historical perspective and we compare the world we live in today with its past, I think we can identify a number of differences and evolutions. And I would like to emphasize 3 of them in particular. I draw, to make these 3 points, I draw on the work of a number of social theorists, mostly Niklas Luhmann, but also Reinhard Kosbeck and his sociology of time, also Ulrich Beck, Nico Stair, and others. So let me try to make these 3 points. Maybe the first and most obvious point to make, and I won't spend much time on this, but it's important, I think, to remind you, because we've not always understood this fully, is that we all live today in one and the same society. I think this is obvious to some of you and maybe more controversial to others, but it no longer makes sense to say that we come from different societies. We live in a world society. Of course, we live under very different conditions. We have distinct occupation, we do different things. Different regions of the world, different communities have different paths, different backgrounds. There are wars, conflicts. these processes are part of this world society. It's a global society with a very high level of regional complexity, many regional differences, many inequalities, but it's a world society. Now, what makes our world society a world society is the fact that it is organized globally around a series of problems or systems. This is what sociologists call the functional differentiation of society. And I will just take an example that we know very well. The fact that we send children to schools, or that we think of education as something that can be organized systematically, it's a global phenomenon. It's not national. Education is not a national phenomenon. It's a global. And there are differences in the way it's being organized in different areas, but it is a global phenomenon. Even the fact that in some places there are no schools, or some children cannot go to school, cannot be educated, that fact does not make education less of a global phenomenon. Right? It's a global phenomenon. It's because it's a global phenomenon that we can identify places where it's not happening. Right? Because it's global. And of course, there are many other global phenomena. The fact that we here, researchers, we try to produce knowledge through scientific research, it's a global phenomenon. Even if research might be less developed in some areas than in others. There are, and those of you who know the work of Niklas Luhmann or earlier sociologists, of course, can identify a number of global systems that make our society a world society. Now, functional differentiation is already an old process. If we look at more recent evolutions, we can take another one that I think now we're going to more important and more interesting one about the state of our modern society. Maybe one of the most striking change that we have experienced in the last decades is a change in the way we relate to the future. If we try and draw a history of the future, and we can try to do that, to draw a history of the future, and that means we compare how we used to think about the future in the past with the way we think about the future in the present. If we make that comparison, of course, a clear difference comes straight into light. The future is no longer understood as it was the case a few decades ago. It's no longer understood as some improved version of the present. And it is not either understood, as it was the case also even a longer time ago, as repeating the past. Okay? Today the future has become perceived as uncertain. We do not know what is going to happen to us. And today more than ever before, we know that we do not know what is going to happen to us. And we increasingly know that our leaders do not know what is going to happen to us either. The truth is that no one knows. We have many hypotheses, of course, we have many scenarios about the future, but we do not know. And we are becoming increasingly aware of this lack of control over our future. Of course, one could argue, and one would be right to argue, that the future has always been unknown. But the difference is that today it is increasingly perceived as such. It's perceived as uncertain, it's perceived as full of risk. And this, the way we perceive the future is very important, of course, because many of the things that we do, when we think about it, most of the things that we do in the present, especially in education, but not only in education, the things that we do in the present, we do them because we have a certain view of the future. What to learn, how to teach, and why, because we have a certain understanding of the future. So changes in our understanding of the future can have many, many implications in the present. We no longer stand on stable grounds. We are not sure what to do. We are not sure what to expect. The French sociologist François Duvet called this process a process of institutional decline in the book, the decline of institutions. Certainties disappear. Luhmann spoke of a progressive replacement of normative expectations by cognitive expectations. Giddens spoke of a reflexive modernity to emphasize the unstable character of modernity. That means the fact that everything can be questioned. Why do things this way? Why not do them differently? This is reflexive modernity. Nothing is stable anymore. Beck spoke of a risk society. But all of them, whether Duvet, Luhmann, Giddens, Beck, they all point to the same evolution. Things that used to be perceived as self-evident are no longer self-evident. Things that we used to take for granted can no longer be taken for granted. We no longer stand on stable grounds. We have reached the point where we can only be certain that we cannot be certain. You probably know, or many of you know, the work of Arnold Rosat. Rosat defines the present. What is the present compared to the past and the future? Rosat defines the present as the length of time during which we know what to expect. And he argues that the present is shrinking. So the length of time during which we know what to expect, or we think we know, this length of time diminishes. And this is the reason why we experience what he calls an acceleration of time. Without it, we have too many things to do, too many problems to solve, too many decisions to make. We run behind. We ask for delays, we apologize. We all experience this. We live in a time of acceleration. We live in this risk society. Now, I would like to emphasize a third evolution, running parallel to this one. We certainly have less certainty than ever before, but at the very same time, we also have much more knowledge than ever before. Of course, it's obvious. We have never ever had so much knowledge. We have never ever had so many theories, so much data, so much information, so many books and papers, so many accounts of the world. We know more about the past than it has ever been the case in the past. So all in all, it seems reasonable to say that we, as a society, as a world society, we have never ever accumulated so much knowledge. We have more and more disciplines, we have more and more sub-disciplines. Any given scientific discipline is so burdened with its own knowledge that it has become difficult, if not impossible actually, for any one individual to claim that he or she masters their entire discipline. There is too much. We cannot read all the books that are being written, even if we picture the good ones. We cannot even collect, never mind read, we cannot even collect all the papers that seem of interest, even in our own field of research. We produce more data than we are capable of processing, even with the help of robots and algorithms. So we don't just live in a world society, in a risk society, we also live in a knowledge society, or information society, a society full of data. Now, if we bring together the 3 points that I just made, we end up with a seemingly paradoxical situation. As a world society, we have never had so much knowledge, and at the same time, we have never had so many uncertainties. Now, at first sight, this may seem like to go against common sense, right? In the common sense, you would think, well, the more knowledge you get, the less ignorant you become. But it doesn't seem to work as well. In the level of society, more knowledge comes together with more ignorance. We have never known so many things. We have never been so uncertain and certain, actually, not facing uncertainty. The more we know, the less we know. Right? And in fact, this is logical, because it is because we have more knowledge that we have less certainty. And that means that, and I think it's important to reflect on this, the work that we do as scientists, as researchers, as producers of knowledge, contributed to this strange situation in which we find ourselves today. This modern condition of having so much knowledge and so many uncertainties, this modern condition applies to society in general, but it applies also to specific fields, of course, including the field of education. There too, we have more uncertainty than ever before. Well, what we should do, what we should learn, how we should teach, how schools should be organized, whether they should be schools at all. And there too, we have, of course, more knowledge, more information, more data than ever before. You can take any kind of debates in which we are involved in this conference. Say, for example, it's just an example among many others, for example, how teachers should teach and the competence that they should give them, right? This is a question that used not to be a question. In a not so far away past, what was expected of a good teacher was not a real question. Because people knew, in a way they knew without knowing, that they shared a common understanding about what a teacher was and how he or she should behave. Now we have hundreds, we have actually thousands of books about teachers and how they should do what they do, and how they should change, and how they should learn, and how they should become different. The amount of knowledge is huge. But we, as a society, we no longer have a shared answer to that question. We have so many answers. We have so much knowledge that we, as a society, no longer have a common view. We do not know as a society. We wonder. That's what we want. So we are engaged in this process of losing stable grounds, losing common perspectives, losing shared views on the world. And it affects our understanding of the future, what is going to happen to us. It affects our present. We have no shared understanding of what we should be doing. Now, the second question that I want to deal with, now that I have made these points about world society, risk society, knowledge society, and this kind of paradoxical situation in which we find ourselves, the question I want to deal with is how we react to that situation. And more specifically, how does education react to that situation? You could also wonder, how does research and science react to that situation? But we focus on education. We can point towards different types of reaction. The first reaction we can identify is a process of expansion. One could think that the disappearance of uncertainties operate as a sort of obstacle to education, but actually it's the opposite. Right? The process of losing stable grounds, which is a long and deep process that has been active for several decades now, this process of losing stable grounds has not blocked education. It has not reduced its importance. It has not diminished the amount of time and energy that people spend educating themselves and others. It has not reduced the number of topics, themes, disciplines one can hope to access through education. Actually, exactly the opposite happened. It has created a need for ever more education. The more the future and the present become uncertain, the more we lose our certainties, the more education is required to operate as a sort of solution. Education then becomes a sort of social policy or a risk policy, a means for individuals to protect themselves against risks, a means for the state to guard against economic, social, environmental, political risk in the future. So future uncertainties operate not as obstacle, but rather as trigger for ever more education. We can distinguish actually three dimensions of this expansion. There is a thematic expansion, there is a temporal expansion, there is a social expansion. These three expansions, they are linked to three questions. What to teach? That's the thematic expansion. Who should be educated? And when should one be educated? What to teach? Who to educate and when? And each of these three questions, they used to have limited and strict answers. They used to have kind of stable grounds, right? And it's not the case anymore. So they no longer have strict limits. So answers to this question expand. Answers expand, right? The thematic expansion means that we have a tendency to expand the range of fields, topics, problems about which some sort of education is organized. We just think about it, it's obvious. Think of entrepreneurship, citizenship, intimate relationship, software coding, climate change, health, and we could have a very, very long list of new topics that continuously appear in the field of education. And each of them can be understood as a way of responding to future risk. Be it the very general risk of being ready for the unknown, what is to come, or more specific risk, terrorism, non-government, environmental threats, etc. So that's the thematic expansion. There is also a social expansion, it's very well known, so I won't speak about it much, but it's mass education and the expansion of the number of people being educated. And the temporal expansion of education is, of course, also very visible. I mean, the fact that education is no longer restricted to youth, but it expands towards both early childhood education, lifelong learning, and people spend more and more time in the system. Now, this process of education, of expansion, the fact that there are more topics, more people, more temporal windows dedicated to education, also comes together with the process of fragmentation. The education system expands. It expands with the number of people, the number of topics, and the temporal windows where it's active. So the system expands, but at the same time, it becomes more fragmented. It becomes more intimately differentiated. So expansion and fragmentation come together. Now, I would like to emphasize She says, in times of high uncertainty, attention tends to shift from first-order observation to second-order observation. One observes what others do, rather than how things are. So this is a very typical reaction to uncertainty. You can easily see it through a very simple experiment. If you tell a group of students, or you tell a group of people that they have an urgent task to do, right? You tell them you have an urgent task to do, but at the same time you make sure that they don't have a clear understanding of what is it that they have to do. Right? Put them in the situation, and what happens then? They look at each other. They will look at each other. They will wonder what the others do, how the others understood the task. And that's what we do. When we don't know what to do and we are not sure what to do, we're not sure we do it well, we look at what others do. And this is a process we can observe at many different levels, including the level of national education systems. We look at Finland, right? We look at Germany, we make comparison. We compare outcomes, levels of success, we compare practices, we wonder why is this country successful, why is that other system running behind. We produce numbers, because numbers are kind of an easy way to compare, but we also produce more qualitative descriptions. We describe best practices. So we produce data, we look for information, we accumulate knowledge in the hope that this will solve our problem of not knowing what exactly we should do. However, the more we know, the less we do. And so what is happening is that we multiply the number of descriptions of the world we live in, whether with numbers or otherwise, right? We multiply the number of descriptions of the world we live in, and we end up not with a solution. We end up having to live in a world which contains multiple descriptions of itself. And instead of reducing the excess of possibilities, instead of highlighting the right decision to make, more knowledge, more data, more description, make even more visible the fact that there are other ways of doing it. So we never reach any sort of final answer telling us this is the right way, this is the solution. Instead, what is happening is that we put in place a global dynamic where only one thing is certain and only one thing is permanent, is that we must change. We must become different. We must improve. We must constantly learn to become different from who we are. And there seems to be no end to that process. It's a loop. It's a loop that keeps amplifying itself. Learning, that's the only remaining norm. Learning, the requirement to learn, is the last and only remaining norm. The one thing that does not change is the requirement to change. Now, in order to reach some kind of a conclusion, I think it's important to try and better understand why we ended up in this situation. Why is it, and I think that's the question, why is it that we now live in a world without stable grounds? There are a number of books that deal with this question and claim to explain the current state of our modern global society. And of course, each book puts forward its own thesis. I would like to suggest that we can distinguish between two types of answers to that question in the literature. The first type of answer is the most popular. It's part of a long tradition of critical sociology. It brings together a number of theses which have in common the fact that they claim that the situation that we experience today can be attributed to a specific group of people, or more often and more intelligently, that it can be attributed to a specific logic, to a specific system, to a specific part of society, which is responsible for what's happening. And most of the time it's either the economy or the exercise of power or politics. So this first type of answer is looking for a cause. We can point the finger to. It's looking for a culprit. It's looking for a part of society or one logic within society which would be responsible for this evolution. Pierre Bourdieu is an example of this. You mentioned, I wrote a book on Bourdieu years ago. Pierre Bourdieu is an example of this. Bourdieu argued that because he wrote about the uncertainty and the increasing uncertainty he experienced, and he argued that at the end, in ECER, he argued that the uncertainty of the future is just a discourse produced by dominant actors to put pressure on dominated actors and in this way ensure the reproduction of their domination. So this is an example, very short, summarized view of a critical perspective on the situation. You attribute it to a specific group or a specific logic of most of a logic of domination, and you distinguish between those who are affected and those who are responsible. This first answer seems to me to correspond to a very old process in the history of humanity, where insecurity increases. We have a tendency to look for a scapegoat that we can blame. We can point the fingers to, we can fight against it. Scapegoating has always been a way to respond to insecurity. Now, what I would like to argue is that there might be another answer, maybe a more difficult one that we can find, notably in the work of Niklas Luhmann, but also in others. For Luhmann, it doesn't make sense to attribute the state of society to a specific component of that society, to a specific dynamic, whether economic or political, for example. For Luhmann, today's society is not the outcome of a political project, and it is not simply the product of the economy. His answer is different. His answer goes back to what I spoke about at the very beginning, the functional differentiation of modern society. Now, in the early 90s, or even before, if you look at the German version of this text, Luhmann made an interesting statement about the functional differentiation of our world society. He wrote, and you have a quote here, the separates the interrelated evolutions of the different functional domains within our differentiated society will reinforce the predictability, the independence, will bring about a higher degree of uncertainty with respect to the future. What was the idea behind this, according to Luhmann? He thinks of modern society as a functionally differentiated society, And all function systems for human, whether education, research, politics, the economy, law, all systems, all the function systems operate simultaneously. And modern society, the situation in which we find ourselves today, is, I know it's a difficult answer, but is the outcome of multiple uncoordinated dynamics operating simultaneously. And that means that no one is truly over in modern society. No one is truly in control. The situation in which we find ourselves today has not been created by a specific system, even less so by a specific group of people. It is the outcome of modernity itself. Modernity was from the start going to produce this situation. If we agree to follow Luhmann, then, this would be my conclusion, then it becomes clear that the life without stable grounds that we now live is not something that we can resist or that we can fight against as if it were something external to us. It is rather a very constitutive condition that we all take part in. Something we all contribute to. Something which is even part of who we are. Something which made it possible that we become researchers, for example. It's not something we can reject, it's not something we can deny, but maybe it's something we can learn to handle better. How can we live in uncertainties? How can we live in the dark? How can we deal, and how do we deal with our lack of knowledge, with not knowing, not being sure? How do we deal with that? Our usual way of responding so far has been to say, well, we need more and better education, we need more and better research, we need more knowledge, we need more and better laws, we need more and better policy making. We need more of the same, we need to increase and continue this functional differentiation of society. That's the answer that we have so far developed. It has solved many problems, but we can see that it just perpetuates itself. It's self-defining, it accelerates all that. Right? And we all experience this, I think we all experience this situation of facing a difficult situation. And my question, and I really don't have an answer, my question is, can we just continue and for long to react to the situation in this same way? I will stop here.
It won't be a question, but we expect that in circumstances like that. No, thanks a lot for your inspiring journey and for letting us to observe your liking for German philosophers of the 20th century, which gives some interesting answers, but being from the German background myself, I always have my questions because I wouldn't deny that these elements of your analysis as world society, society, knowledge society, that they describe important features of what people can experience nowadays, but I very much would call into question if we should take this as the whole answer. because of just these philosophers you have quoted, they tend to be a bit linear in their answers, that they tend to be one-sided. And their answers are rather go with the Australian philosopher like Bob Clinton. Yes, it's true, but look, is there not a backside of these things? Should we not look at other things? And I try to make now clear examples, and in my view, the problem of German philosophers after Hegel is that they do not see the other side. So, if you look, for instance, at this argument of world society, certainly, in some sense, this is our experience. We can travel to Armenia, and it's easy with an European passport to travel, but else around. And if you look at, for instance, the situation in the Chinese Sea, where the warships go on, then yes, boundaries are a convention, but they are a convention where a lot of physical power can be organized behind. Yeah? And if you look at this quotation from Niklas Luhmann, and occasionally we generate reasons for war. It wasn't written in 1997 as in the presentation, but a little bit earlier. But today that would seem obscene for us to talk in that way. In my view, it would seem. The same, in my view, would be true for this analysis of risk society. I think that for the people in this room, many would agree, yes, the future is more unsafe. But if we look at different groups of the society in the earlier centuries, they were not all sure, maybe because of religion, but they were more in certain circumstances. But on the other hand, there was economic uncertainty for them. They didn't know how to stand the next day and so on. And the same would be true in my view for knowledge society, because that's true, there's a lot more knowledge, but how are we using knowledge? What knowledge is used for decision? Who is in position? So what I'm saying now, if I summarize that, I always thought the strength of sociology is to look at society as differentiated, and refer to that as stratified, as structured, and as historically developing. And my fear is that in some sense, this analysis by these German philosophers, they are a bit losing this idea, because they're always arguing with the experience. And the idea of some sociology, as he said, is we are not sure about to be. Is to be more differentiated. We were guarding yourself with the last section of when you said if you are asking for actors with responsibilities, that's some type of scapegoating. Yes, it may be, but in my view, it's not necessarily. It's an important element of sociological analysis, also to asking for actors. So, and if you ask for actors, if you ask for dynamics, then you may evade the danger of thinking that these things are inevitable. In the functionality, that may be true, but in the specificity, I think it's not true. So, I'm sorry that was no question, but you know what kind of question is behind that. So, is it not necessary to augment your argumentation, which I think in itself is valid, with some differentiation? Thank you.
Should I answer or take another question? Or? Okay, well, there is no really one question, so it's difficult to react to everything here. Maybe some points that you mentioned, German philosophers, but think I would say it's not reduced to German philosopher. I think that of course German sociologists, but also sociologists from other. It's true that I cite many German ones, but I think you find a very, very similar view in Giddens' work, for example. So I wouldn't relate it to the German context, and even less so to just philosophy. Now, just a few reactions, but I cannot respond to everything you said earlier, because I'm not sure I understood it all, but also because there were many stuff. But maybe one thing about the world society and the notion of borders. I mean, there is no reason to think that there are no borders within this world society. Of course there are borders, of course they matter, of course there are many, many differences within this world society. But if we take, as sociologists, the notion of society as a concept, right, and if we take concept seriously, then it's difficult to think that at some point we move from one society to another, today, in today's world. If we take the concept, the notion of society as a concept. Because these interdependencies are over the globe, and even in contexts which are totally different from the developed context in which we are today, we will observe that context, and that context will often observe itself in relation to the rest of the world. And so they will say, well, here there is no schools, for example, or there are no democracy, but that reading, that type of observation is only possible because it's situated in a world society where other parts have developed education and democracy. So I stick to the idea that we live in a world society, and I stick to the idea that, of course, there can be borders, conflicts, wars within this world society. But more generally, no? I mean, because you might have other questions. And I'm sorry, because you made so many points that I cannot react to all of them.
Yeah, if I can, or
sorry, I think we are running out of time.
Sometimes every time is used for, but I don't think that we are in any more way than before. Because if you look back, these processes are basic of knowledge about Russian, but at least since the Russian capitalism in the market. Because it's not 100 years, they have had a shift period where they have been insurgent, there have been hope, there have been progress, there have been turmoil and uncertainty and piracy. Not here to, so I don't think in that sense that our time today are new in that sense. We have seen this before. It's 30 years ago they were technically very developed and now, but we don't have those behind us.
I have to say, I'm not sure I understood everything you said because there was noise in the room, but from what I understood, my reaction has been very brief because you don't understand that. But if I understood your point is to say this is not new, and of course, and maybe I should have made that clear that the kind of perspective that I was trying to work with, if we think, for example, of functional differentiation, which is a very important thing for the sociology that I try to do at least. Well, it's a very, very long program. It's a process that started centuries ago. Okay? And so, of course, we can see this, we can see events during which this level of uncertainty, as I'm speaking today, had increased in the past. Already, I was speaking of a kind of a long-term trend in which we find ourselves today. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm not sure I understood your question completely. So, again, maybe more